Right, muckers, yeah, that little David Brown dozer, all right, 60 years old now. And those that have followed the channel for a while, you'll remember when we first got this running, and it had been stood for over 30 years. Check it out.
Easy peasy.
What's it like?
It's not too bad, is it?
And then we went on to spend a bit of money on it and had all the rams redone and all the pipes and hoses and stuff like that. And now we're at the stage where we're going to have to spend more money because we want to do the tin work, get new bonnet and all that rolled, go right through everything again, change one or two bits. There's a few leaks and that sort of thing. And the best way, though, to see if it's worth spending that money and see if anything else needs doing is to put it to work. So that new gauge has got to go in there. So there's got this bracket on the back. I feed the gauge in from the front. The bracket then nips it all up. I'll show you how that goes. Then down at this end, that's where the feed goes in for the oil pressure gauge. The pipe comes out of there, then up to the back of the dash into the gauge itself. We can put that on the back there and just feed that on. Okay, that's done up. Okay, so that is now tightened up. The supply pipe is tightened into the back. So there we are, we've got a new oil pressure gauge. Mind you, I need to test if that gauge works first, everything's leaking. So lovely. There. Now another problem we've got is that the air cleaner, this oil bath air cleaner, is completely rotten. You can see there. It's absolutely done. Now finding one with the right size inlet and outlet is proving a little bit difficult, but you know, for the time being I want to get something on there. And luckily some friends of mine over in Ireland, Jim and Shane Gregan, they know all things David Brown. They got a wonderful collection of David Browns. They really know the stuff. I was talking to Shane and he said, well, we'll try and match up something. So we've got this one. This is, I think, off something like a 1200 or something like that. It's one of the big engine David Browns. It's obviously slightly different. We're going to have to maybe make one or two modifications. But this is slightly smaller than that. But with a piece of rubber hose slipped over that, it'll then obviously increase the OD. So that's all right. That all looks fairly good. The size of it is all about right as well. So for the time being, just to get a filter on here, we can modify this. Right, so we had to cut the bolts off the fastening straps. The reason for that is that they were a nut, one side, then the bolt didn't have a hexagonal head on it like a normal bolt. It was purely round with a screwdriver slot. Now that'd have been great 60 years ago when it's brand new, but as long as my arse faces south, that wasn't going to undo because I had grips clamped down on the round side here. I had the rattle gun the other side, the old 3/8 impact wrench, and that wasn't going anywhere. So quickest and easiest way, cut through them and then just replace them with normal nuts and bolts. And then hopefully we can then start figuring a way up with getting this all to match up. And for once, we'll have an oil bath air cleaner on the old girl. Now this is the original air intake elbow. So if we can get some bits of rubber both ends, we could possibly mount and fit this on there. But we'll have to see. If not, we'll go back to using a bit of flexi hose just for the time being. And that's been on there years. Right, we just had an Agri-Line parcel arrive. Now, I've always wanted to put another cutting edge on this, but before we do that, well, obviously we want to try the machine out, but before we do that, we'll have to then have some work done. I'll have this pretty cut, another piece put on here first, and then new holes drilled, because look, it's starting to get a bit thin there. Be all right for this, what we're going to do now, it'll be absolutely fine, but like I said, in time when I replace the whole thing and the other end, I'm going to have that done. New holes drilled. Okay, so obviously this is worn over time, but it was loose before. Now it's bolted up and it's solid. As I said, it is worn because it's pulled itself back on that bottom edge. But like I said before, I'm not going to just needlessly throw loads of money at something which may or may not end up working. So there we go. Once we know that this is all okay and we're not going to have to pull the engine out or something like that, then I can find out where I can get the proper sized air cleaner, because it's slightly longer, the proper one. Anyway, look, we've got it. So we've got a proper oil bath air cleaner on here now, direct to the manifold with the proper elbow. But before I just finish off here, I've got the bit from Agri-Line. Look at that. Now, how sweet does that look? Just finishes off a right treat. Believe it or not, that is the actual original mushroom that goes on that air cleaner. And it was a raised one because this is the original air cleaner pipe. So I'd like to see this on here again when we do it, but there we go. So before we start today, just topped up the oils in the final drives, both in this one and that one. And we're now going to do, just top up the gearbox because that's a bit low. Can't get that plug out at the moment, so I'll just undo these 4 bolts, take that plate off, and we can fill the oil through there. Dipstick is there. So that's the cover taken off, and that in there, that's the PTO shaft, which comes out there. Now, you know, loading soil where it's been tipped, moving it with the dumper, then having to get the digger in and sort of grade it back out, and you know, because we haven't got a huge amount of room, we can't have a huge amount of weight on this job, don't forget, because I said it's wet. The ideal thing, actually, once the soil's where it needs to be and pushes it out, and you know, with tracks which obviously spread the weight nicely, is the little dozer. So it was a, you know, an ideal opportunity to try it out. So as we know from previous videos, and I'll put a link to those in the description box below this video, this has been stood for over 30 years. It's been parked up undercover, but for 30 years, hadn't done the thing. So we got it back in, you know, into running order, Kimberly and I. She gave me a hand to get things done like the hydraulics, and you know, we serviced the engine, if you remember, did all the, you know, oils and filters and stuff like that. We got it running first. We knew it was worth spending the money on. However, that's like a stage 1, because now there's more, you know, sort of large scale investment. There's things like tin work. We could get a new bonnet and all tin work rolled for it and made, you know, so it matches it identical to this, but that's a big chunk of money. Then there's things like the seat. Now this seat is actually off the other David Brown 40 TD. So we're just currently, you know, we've got this one that's just borrowed. So it's got to go back on there. But back, seat, base, and 2 armrests, you know, you're looking best part of sort of 250-300 quid. we were very lucky to get this air cleaner, as I said, off Shane and Jim Gregan for, you know, just getting us through this sort of time that we're testing everything out. And then we'll look for an actual proper style air cleaner, which, as I said, is slightly deeper, slightly bigger. But it works. That works with the original elbow on there, that's fine. Fan belt, the fan belt seemed all right actually. About an inch of play like it should have, so that's all good. But there are things like the exhaust manifold. Now we've got this nice, obviously new exhaust from Agriline. That sounds a treat. Really got a nice little bark to it. But the manifold itself, and then you've got the little riser on top. There's a hole had been blown through that over time, so that wants repairing. Well, actually, to be honest, now we know it works, we can invest a bit more and replace it, just get a new one. Because it's worth it. It's not like, you know, there's one or two things like this, like the toolbox. We've got the original toolbox on here, but the back, it's slightly rotten. So it really does want another piece put in the back here or across there. But all, you know, letting and done properly. It does, but it wants repairing. It's a good solid toolbox. Tracks. So every morning that I've come here, I've greased all the undercarriage. We've got to do that again today before we start. So front idlers, all the bottom rollers, top rollers and stuff like that. One or two linkages. What else we got? Oh yes, we did that piece that we bolted on the front. Although this corner obviously over time has worn, so it got loose and bent that back a bit. It's in place and hasn't moved with them new bolts in it, so that's really good. But that blade wants a new cutting edge, but it actually wants the bottom of the blade. It wants a new piece put in there for the cutting edge to go on, because that's worn thin. This little thing, don't forget, as I said, is like 60 years old, and it has done thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours. All right, it's done a lot of work in its lifetime. And then you think in the last 30 years it's done nothing, but before that it did a lot of work. Obviously that new rod, so much easier to control that blade now. When you move this, the blade goes up. When you move it down, the blade goes down. There's no delay because of all the play in the linkage. It's just like new now. Then there's things like the dynamo. We have to check out, you know, is it charging the battery and stuff like that. Rewire it. Again, starter motor, probably get that overhauled. Works, probably get it overhauled because, you know, it's done its time. We've done the hydraulics already. That is to say, these rams and the hydraulic hoses and the lines and the other bits, talking about $2,000 that came to. So it was a lot of work involved, all new eyes being made up and pins and stuff, you know. But as I said, once you know it's worth doing, you invest in the next step. And the next step really for this then is, as I said, the finishing touches, I think. So it is worth having tin work made for this. But before the new tin work goes on, before the new seat and fixtures and fittings go on to make this like the finished product, the Dozer needs blasting, priming and painting. And there's a lot of stuff to strip off again. Actually, you have to take it back a fair way to go, 2 steps back, 1 step forward almost. But everything's got to be stripped off it, and then, like I say, to probably take the blade off so you can get to it properly. Seat base, the actual whole seat mechanism up here, that needs to come off. Dash and all that. Just so it's a bare machine, an actual almost like a skid unit, and then that could be blasted. Get it all sandblasted or whatever, and then we can prime it, then we can paint it, and then everything else can be bolted back on. Then we can put new seat on it, new tin work. It should look lovely. Now, to be fair, the undercarriage isn't that bad. Drive sprockets aren't too bad. All the pins and the chains are all good. Rollers aren't too bad, as I said, especially because we're keeping them greased. So that'll keep them going for a good few years, hopefully. But there are always 1 or 2 little things that want doing. There's always the odd pipe wants, tightening up, or there's a linkage wants adjusting. And on this, the clutch wants adjusting, as in on the pedal. There's a bit of there's probably twice as much play in the pedal as there should be. It's about 2 inches, it only needs to be 1 inch. Things like that. But for the time being, this is good enough. Now, one thing I do want to do, now we've had this running, say, for a few days, and given, you know, it's been working hard, I want to check the coolant, the actual, all the galleries and that, where the coolant goes around the engine block. You can say, well, how are you going to do that? Well, I'll show you in a minute. Now, you heard me mention earlier about wanting to just check that we've got no blockages or hot spots in this block, because that's what can kill a block as quick as anything. That the fact that you'll get somewhere that's not being cooled, and that part heats up, that heat then transfers into the cylinder wall, and that can then transfer into the fact that the basically seize up on the piston. You know, you can get things like that happen. Or you can get parts where the coolant isn't getting round again, so you get hot areas build up, and then you get deposits building up attracted to the heat, and that then blocks the gallery, and again the same thing, overheat and whatever. So I want to make sure that there are no big hot spots on this engine, because I said it hasn't run for 30 years, had 3 days hard work, so it should have settled in by now. Now, earlier this year I was contacted by a company called Topdon. Now, this is before George Saunders had been contacted, or Kimberley had been contacted, right, by them. And you know how they rave about their kit. Well, as I said, I was contacted and asked, would I be interested in looking at and trying out, funnily enough, a heat gun. So a thermal imaging gun to show where hot spots are or cold spots are. And I thought, what a bit of kit, especially when you're doing a willet start, you know, to make sure you've not got blocked waterways and stuff like that. So I said I'd agree to do it under my normal proviso, which is I'm not just going to get it, open the box and use it and say, this is great, guys, because I don't know if it is or not. I said I want to use it for at least 6 months. And they said, yep, we're happy with that. So I've had this and I've tried it on all sorts of bits of kit. And I've lent it to a couple of people as well. And basically, this is what it is. First thing I noticed when I got it out of the box was just how well it's made. Now, again, since I got this, as you know, George has had, I think he's had a battery charger and booster, same as Kimberley, and also the little ODB reader that Kimberley's got as well, all right, and that tells you how good the battery is and stuff like that. Well, listen, the first thing we all noticed is how good the quality of the kit is. Honestly, that's the first thing that you see when you get it out of the box, whatever it is. So I thought, okay, this actually looks promising. Okay, and I don't know if you can see, but that is the Dozer. That is the image of the Dozer there. So obviously there is something there. That's fine. Now, what you can do is look, and at the moment this is like a purpley colour because it's cold. And that's only run for about 2 minutes just to bring it here. Look at the manifold, the heat in the manifold. And that's saying that's at about, let's just have a look on the manifold. What is it there? Let's get a strike on that. It is about 36.5 degrees at the moment, as I say, because it's only just fired up. So you can put your hand on it, it's not hot. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to run it and put it to work for half an hour, get it up to temperature, and then we'll have another look. Right, let's have a look at this now. Look, can you see that? Looks like the engine's on fire. It's really good. So that's what it shows. Obviously that's warm now. So let's actually have a look for some hot spots. If you can see anything. So behind there, and there, you can actually see where the combustion chambers actually sit with the pistons, because they're really hot. So that's good. You can see where that is. So let's have a look at that exhaust manifold. You see that there? So that's the exhaust manifold, glowing a lovely white. But this side again, no, there's no hot spots. It's obviously where the exhaust comes out from each cylinder. But everything else looks to be hunky-dory. Because what you would see if there was a blocked waterway, the shades of like the whites, the yellows, the oranges and stuff like that, there would be a hot spot. That's how you normally tell. This is very sensitive, so that's why I like this. It's brilliant. For what I do, as I said, for looking at all the cooling galleries and that, see if there's any hot spots, it's so clear, it's so concise. But the best bit is, it's so well made. I mean, no Dozer here, but... And I'm not afraid to do that with that, because it is so well. You could drop it and whatever, because tools get knocked about, what it's like. But I have to say, like, the stuff that they have sent in the past to Kimberly, the ODB reader and that little booster pack thing, and the big booster pack they sent to George, and also... And we're all the same, like even like off camera, and we're just sat and we think, how can that stuff be so good for so little money when compared to the major brands? But honestly, Top Don, the best thing to do, I mean, you may not want one of these, but they are bloody useful. You might want the charger or something like that, but just go and look at Top Don's site. Their stuff is brilliant, honestly. So go to their site. I'll put a link to the actual sale of this thing, so if you want to have a look at one of these. But Top Don's catalogue, I'll put that below this video in the description box. So there we are, muckers. And if you want to help support the channel and support the dogs, then you can go to our merch shop, and I'll put a link to that. Obviously, www. Who does that anymore? It's lordmuckshop.com. And there's loads of hoodies, t-shirts, pens, mugs, stickers, all that sort of stuff over there. And also a big thank you, before I forget, to our Patreon supporters. We've got other footage and videos and stuff over there. I'll put a link to that for those of you that are interested. But anyway, like I said, we now know we've got 1 or 2 jobs to do at this, but it has been absolutely wonderful using this whole thing again, and she's just performed and been no bother. Well, looks like that's that time again, muckers. So thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one, eh? Do well.